Today my dad turns 55, so I wrote this letter. I know who my dad is. Maybe I know him too well. Then again, I don't know him at all. He's what I call a familiar stranger. I know him, but I don't. I called him today to wish him a happy birthday. A call which lasted 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I don't speak to him much, but he's never shut out of my mind. I live in my own world, but I think of him more often than the times that I see him face to face. Maybe because I'm so much like him. He hasn't been in my life much. He's the abstract and transcendental puzzle piece that never seemed to fit. I can only tell people so much about him if I ever chose to say anything about him at all. I know that he served in the Marines during the 70s and spent a lot of time in Japan, but I never knew what and for why. Since coming out of the service in 1979, he worked for the Chicago and Northwestern Railway, which is now part of Union Pacific, giving years of commitment and dedication through his service as a brakeman, a yard hostler, and then as a locomotive engineer. He reached the landmark of 30 years on the job this past July. Though he and my mom divorced in '83, he later remarried and has been with his current wife, Sandy, for about 18 years. Sandy has always been like a second mom to me. When I lived with them in my early 20s, I often turned to Sandy during a turbulent period of emotional adolescence I had. I suffered from a great identity crisis, and it didn't help that because I had been such a disappointment to my dad for so long, he couldn't stand sometimes to look at me. My mom raised me herself, but taught me to never hate him. Mama never stopped me from seeing him regardless of how occasional it was. The older I got, the more I found myself at his house. It was painful how much I realized how much I wanted to be like him. I wanted a good job like him, and a nice house and 2 cars like him. I wanted his wisdom. He had such an ability to apply boundless insight and tested experience in almost every situation. I wanted to be a provider like him the same way he provided for Sandy and the rest of his house. I wanted to be cool like him, be a genius like him, and be smooth and kingly like him. But I couldn't be like him. I don't know what went wrong in my life where it got so messed up. I couldn't keep a job sometimes longer than a month, and I never had any money. I was more irresponsible than any other person I knew. I stuttered badly when I spoke, and I could hardly look anyone in the eye, especially my father. I slept on the floor behind the couch in his living room at night and wandered the streets during the day. I had no direction in life, no idea who I was, and no idea why I existed. I disappointed my dad sorely. Perhaps he saw a marred reflection of himself, of which he could never be proud. I couldn't do anything right, and there was something wrong with everything I did. So I turned to the women I knew at the time for the love that I would never get from him. A relationship with my dad was a super impossibility. Even when I finally got on my own and matured and learned to do for myself, he never came to visit. Not in the 8 years I've lived in Indiana. I know for myself that I've changed so much, but to him I'll always be the same and not worth his love or the energy that it takes to love. I still fight with the necessity of having emotions of any kind in the first place. He lives only 3 hours from me. If I sat in front of him, it feels like we're 3 million miles apart. I barely see him in person, but I see him every day in the mirror. I see so much of himself in me that it's no laughing matter at all. I don't know whether to embrace the things in me which make me think of him or to hate it with every drop of blood pulsating through my veins. I look like him. I talk so much like him. I am very analytical and cerebral, both in my thinking and speech, like him. I love all kinds of hot sauces and have an array of condiments just as he does. I have a vast music collection and a meticulous attentiveness to detail, just like him. I never saw myself as copying after him. Maybe these are just hereditary and concurrent manifestations of our similarities that are part of who I am. I wonder, though, why I mirror him so much if I feel that I have no real identity in his presence. I have come a long way. I don't look to him to validate who I am and who I've become like I desperately used to. I even see my mistakes and instability of self-discipline in times before as lessons learned today. Sometimes I call myself a $1,000,000 miss. I have a lot to give, but very little to show. I have a crappy and regretful past, but sound maturity and solid dreams. My father once told me hurtful things, and I believed him. I was convinced I was nobody. Only my Heavenly Father can tell me who I am now. He tells me that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He sent His only Son to die for me and prove just how endless and unconditional His love is for me. As long as I have hope in the Lord, I can have hope in myself and in my future. I wish my dad the best. I'm thankful that he made it another year. He is a good man, and I do not hate him. He's an awesome person that so many people should know, even if I only know him so much. If we never become buddies or have any kind of bond, I'll still respect and honor him as my dad. I still think the world of him. And to you, Willie C. Cross Jr., I say happy birthday, and I'm always your son who always loves you. God bless.